We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It is 5:55 a.m., March 9th, and Wednesday. It's 2022. Just got off work. Figured I'd do a podcast because I got to stay up for a therapy appointment at 9 a.m. Yeah, it was a pretty chill night. We actually got a new person, so that's helpful. Supposedly they're supposed to be in my section, maybe. Just kind of helping out wherever. They were slow, obviously, because this was her first night, but it takes a minute to get the hang of it and speed up a little bit. But yeah, so that's hopeful, but it was a pretty chill night. It wasn't overwhelming, surprisingly, considering it was a double truck night. But yeah, today we're just going to have kind of a chill episode. I got some stuff that I researched into, stuff that I'd heard about from other podcasts. I'll get into that later. And something that somebody sent me. So it's going to be kind of a collage of stuff. I know we got a Ouija board story, a Dogman story, and a Spooklight story. Just a mixture of a bunch of different paranormal, maybe some ufology stuff in there, and some current news stuff. So hope you enjoy. So this is some humorous news that I thought was conspiracy related. Harvey Weinstein caught smuggling a box of Milkduds into prison. Harvey Weinstein was reprimanded in prison after being caught with a contraband box of Milkduds. LA County jail guards found and confiscated the candy on November 10th, 2021. For some reason I missed this. It flew under the radar, but I found out about it the other day. I thought it was humorous. After the disgraced movie producer 69 had a face-to-face meeting with one of his attorneys, Sean Berkeley, Variety reported Thursday. Weinstein's counsel said subsequently informed that their legal binders and laptop bags would have to be searched from then on out. The convicted sex offender claimed he was the one who brought the beloved movie theater snack with him when he was extradited from New York to Los Angeles last July, according to records viewed by Variety. But the guards did not buy Weinstein's excuse, saying he had been searched when he arrived and there were no duds to be found. Dun dun dun! One of Weinstein's attorneys, Mark Worksman, told Page 6 that the incident should not detract from the client's model prison behavior. Quote, "We learned about this from the LA County Sheriff's last November," Worksman said in a statement. "From what we've learned, this was the first and only time Mr. Weinstein has been accused of violating the rules, and he has been a model prisoner throughout his ordeal here in Los Angeles." Weinstein echoed that sentiment, telling Variety he's been a model inmate. "This was an innocent misunderstanding," he said. "It will not happen again. I've been a model inmate, following the rules and regulations, and I am sincerely sorry." Weinstein is serving a 23-year sentence for rape and sexual assault following his conviction in Manhattan in February 2020. He is awaiting trial on additional sex crime charges in California court, to which he pleaded not guilty. Out of all things, too, I do find it humorous that it was Milkduds. Like, bruh, you could have smuggled in, like, cigarettes, I don't know, drugs, but to get caught with Milkduds, I don't know, it's just fucking hilarious to me. Man, I just checked the weather and it's supposed to snow today. This is ridiculous. I live here in Kentucky, about an hour from Lexington, and yeah, it popped up on my phone. It's supposed to fucking snow today. I'm so tired of this, and it's like my day off too, so like I could be going hiking and shit, but it's whatever. Yeah, so I'm a big consumer of podcasts. Today I actually started listening to a new podcast. It's got Marcus Parks from Last Podcast on the Left. Him and his wife, they have a music podcast. It's pretty dope because it almost reminds me of radio because they'll talk for a while and then they'll play like songs throughout the whole podcast. It's called No Dogs in Space. They started out doing like punk rock bands, which is pretty cool. They started with the Stooges. It's like I'm on part 3 of like I think a 4-part, maybe 5-part series of Iggy Pop and the Stooges. So it's pretty dope. And they're long episodes too, like an hour, hour and a half, hour and 2-hour episodes, shit like that. So check it out, man. And they go throughout like the whole history of each band that they're covering, and like I think it's humorous. It's pretty funny listening to it. Plus you get to listen to good music too, and makes your night go by quicker while you're working. But I've been listening to this other podcast that I found called Occult Rejects, and they were talking about on some episode about some band that kind of basically their origin story is kind of wrapped in with basically a Ouija board. So I'm not sure. I've never really listened to the band. I would play the music, but YouTube will probably give me a strike, and I'm on Spotify, and I ain't gonna lie, I'm not really sure on their rules if I can or can't. I know they're less strict than YouTube, but you never know. Especially with all this Joe Rogan stuff going on. Like, that's something new that popped up the other day was I'd been downloaded on Spotify for a while. I use Anchor, which is owned by Spotify, and I have like warning labels pop up that they want me to read their guidelines and stuff since all this Joe Rogan stuff's been going on, which I've covered it and stuff in past episodes. But yeah, it kind of sucks, man. I mean, a lot of podcasters are saying like, it started with Alex Jones, and I told people back in the day like, it starts with him, and don't celebrate, if you don't like Alex or whatever, because it started with him, and it's us next, And podcasting is one of the last few things that are not being censored, and now censorship is slowly creeping into podcasting, and it fucking sucks because it was like the last freedom of speech media available. But yeah, I'll get into this because I think it's interesting. Unwelcome spirits haunt the Bedlam in Goliath. As origin stories go, this one's a doozy. While on tour, the Mars Volta bought a Ouija board at Jerusalem Curio Shop. The band used the board as a game, part of its after-show wind-down ritual. Then, according to guitarist and songwriter Omar Rodriguez Lopez, things got strange. Through the board, the same spirits started visiting night after night. Their communications partially inspired the lyrics, and even the sounds. The Mars Volta was developing for its new album. When the band went to the studio to record, chaos ensued. Rodriguez-Lopez says the messages coming through the Ouija board got scary. The studio flooded. There was a series of equipment malfunctions. Fearing that the spirits were behind the problems, Rodriguez-Lopez says he broke and buried the board so the group could finish the album. It sounds preposterous, but spend some time with the Bedlam and Goliath, and the paranormal visitations begin to seem almost plausible. At times it seems the Mars Volta is getting assistance from some of music heaven's luminaries. On the 8-minute headspinner Metatron, there are collisions of instruments Charles Ives would love, and hiccuping odd-metered hijinks straight out of the Frank Zappa's songbook. In a heartbeat, the Mars Volta can go from super-fast rock into a prayer-meeting gospel groove that could have originated in Charles Mingus's workshop. When Rodriguez-Lopez hears the album now, he says it takes him back to the 37 straight days he spent in the studio, and to the unwelcome spirits that were flying around while his band was trying to work. That's audible. The Bedlam and Goliath is thrilling and a little bit terrifying at the same time. It's like some kind of sinister amusement park ride. You get in and discover that Satan is at the controls, and he's smiling, and he has no intention of slowing down until everyone's screaming at the top of their lungs. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I've never listened to the band. Let me know in the comments if they're any good. I just heard about it, and I was like, that'd be interesting to cover on the podcast. But we'll get on with the next story. Now, here's something somebody sent me. And like I said, you guys are welcome to send me stuff through my email. The information's on the main YouTube page. But this is something somebody who was a listener sent me, and I figured I'd share it with you all. It's a Dogman account is what he told me. It's an Army truck driver recounts he and his sergeant's terrifying encounter with several stout bipedal wolves. A former United States Army recovery specialist says that he and his sergeant were plundered by two giant bipedal wolves one creepy night in 1980. The two were returning from the field in their deuce and a half with a partial amount of chow when two cryptid creatures known as the Dogman pillaged uneaten food from their truck before shredding the top. The former recovery specialist, who goes by the name Mo, appeared on episode 315 of Dogman Encounters Radio. He explains what happened to him and his superior that dreadful night in the woods when outside Fort Polk. Mo goes into great detail about his encounter, which adds to the elusive Dogman mystery. At 18 years of age, Mo was in charge of driving his M35 Series 2.5-ton cargo truck, aka Deuce and a Half, to deliver chow to soldiers conducting a field war game exercise in a wooded area about 35 miles from the base. His MOS, I'm not sure what that is, was 63 Fox, and he had just finished serving 13 weeks of basic training in Maryland snow. Mo is a by-the-book type of guy, who also happened to be the driver for his first sergeant nicknamed Top. A lifer with 24 years in the Army, Top was a chain smoker, had a short fuse, and was known to snap when co-workers overheard him talking to himself. As Mo describes it, Top was every bit of 5'3", had a short man complex, and liked to lash out at high volume. So basically like Napoleon complex. Short-tempered, short fuse. TNT comes in small packages. After picking up the soldiers' dinner leftovers at around 2:30 a.m. on the night of the encounter, The two made their way back from the field, where 6 to 7 divisions were conducting a 30-day-long wargaming exercise. At the same time, Top sat shotgun in the passenger seat armed with an unloaded M16 rifle. Using the nightlights feature, Mo drove the truck slowly along the poorly illuminated dirt road at a snail's pace to avoid detection. The truck would get up to no more than 10 miles per hour before Top would shout, "Slow down!" This was protocol. Sometimes, Top smoking really got to Mo, especially on the long hauls. He lit up cigarettes like they were going out of style, one after another, in a continuous fashion. Sounds like me. It was really killing me, to tell you the truth, said Mo, no pun intended, but I really couldn't question that. As the night loomed on, Mo slowly traversed down the dark, bumpy road, heading back to base to return the cook's pots, pans, and cutlery needed for the coming morning run. According to Mo, these soldiers were well fed, eating only the best, quote-unquote, cakes, eggs, sausage, pancakes, you name it, igloos with punches, milk, and coffees. Several miles out from the hardball, which was nothing more than a 2-lane road, Top decided he had to relieve himself and instructed Mo to pull the truck over so he could do so. The right passenger side tire made a good target. At this time, they remained about 2.5 miles into the woods, having spent some time to go until they hit the pavement. But none of that mattered, because Top had to urinate. I heard a noise in the field, he said. It sounded like air brakes going off. That's when Mo noticed eye shine in the woods. There had to be at least 8 little lights, he explained. Damn, sounds like a pack. Mo attempted to warn his first sergeant, but with no luck. Top was smoking, peeing, and talking to himself as this was all transpiring. That's when something started barreling out of the woods, heading directly for the first sergeant. The creature, which appeared to be a giant bipedal wolf, was about 75 yards out, and it was approaching fast. Unaware of the unannounced beast's presence, Top flicked his cigarette toward the field, causing amber sparks that illuminated the bulky animal. Top made a run for it, jumping into the passenger seat of the Deuce and a Half and closing the door before losing complete consciousness, falling atop of the gear shifter, making it that much more difficult for Mo to flee. Top was so rattled by what he had encountered that he passed out immediately. It was snapping at Top, Mo explained. Chop, chop, chop. This dogman's head was the entire size of the full window, he said. It took up the entire window. That's how large this thing's head was. The 10 to 12 foot tall bipedal creature put his claws through the roof like hot butter, said Mo. It goes off with this half bark, half scream that vibrated my chest, he said. My first sergeant passed out. He fell slumped over the top of the gear shifter. My ears rang. It was so loud. This thing is steady chomping. It's as loud as a train horn, Mo said. He hung on this thing like a monkey on a banana. I can't shake him. He's still on me. Mo claims a second female dogman then appeared out of the blue, running alongside the truck at an unbelievable gait. According to Mo, the female creature was trying to communicate with him using telepathy. But all Mo could focus on was the sound of her feet and claws hitting the road. She had huge rabbit feet, he said. She was running at a beautiful pace, kicking up gravel. I thought it was going to break the window, he said. Mo says that he thinks the female dogman was trying to relay a simple message to him, one telling him to, quote-unquote, chill out. We are just hungry, a voice in his mind said calmly. Everything's going to be okay. At the same time, the male dogman jumped into the back of the truck. breaking the tarp supports and tearing the tarp out altogether. It was after the food. The beast removed 6 large containers loaded with leftovers, in what can only be described as as a one-of-a-kind heist. Still, Mo would have to answer his lieutenant once he returned, which he wasn't looking forward to. Needless to say, when Mo and his sergeant returned to base, Mo's lieutenant wasn't too happy with the damage to the truck. Now I share with you a Whitley Strieber account of his abduction. On April 1st, the visitors reacted. What happened was wise and full of humor and teaching, but it was also frightening, and I did not want to be frightened by the visitor experience. I wanted to work, whatever it was, but there was this awful, creepy feeling I could not shake, that it was just plain terrible. I remember waking up while walking along a curving corridor. I want to stress, to make it absolutely clear, that I did not wake up into some sort of dream. I woke up into an absolutely vivid, living, and physical moment, in a world as real as this, but far more strange than any dream. It is important that I describe my physical sensation exactly. I did not feel the way I feel sitting in a chair or walking down a street. My body was tingling, as if some sort of energy was running through it. It was a marvelous sensation, and is one I still feel during some encounters. Pleasant as it is, though, whenever it is over, I always have a sense of relief. Nevertheless, I stumbled as I came to consciousness, because one does not expect to wake up out of a dead sleep in mid-stride. I found myself being led along by 2 dark blue beings, about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. Each of them held one of my forefingers in his cool hand. They were noticeably strong, rather round or pudgy looking, and wearing dark blue coveralls that seemed to have lots of flaps and pockets on them. I was not dressed in the pajamas I had gone to sleep in, but rather in a flowing garment of what was absolutely soft white paper. It stood out from my body as though it carried a heavy charge of static electricity. My condition at this point did not seem to approximate a dream at all. I was simply there, in the real world. And the real world was the curving corridor and the 2 dark blue beings that were leading me along. They were really very, very blue. The color was doubly startling because it was a living hue, as rich with subtle complexity as the color of any flesh. I blurted out the first thought that popped into my mind. "You're blue!" One of them looked back over his shoulder when I spoke. He had a broad, flat face that almost seemed to grimace at me. So wide was the mouth. He fluttered the heavy lids on his deep, shining eyes and said, "We used to be like your blacks, but we decided this was better." That face was as sinister as anything I had ever seen, and yet the feeling of twinkling good humor was so strong that I almost wanted to laugh. I felt ridiculous. I've never thought of myself as a racist, but that comment brought into sharp focus my own unacknowledged attitudes about the differences between white and black people. I had marched in the civil rights movement and have not, from my earliest days, been able to bear racism. But here I was in the presence of a statement so innocent and so powerful that even as I stumbled along, it shocked me with all its guileless force. At that moment, the reality of my unconscious racism surfaced. I felt it as acute embarrassment. In my secret mind, even the 2 beings leading me along were less than me. The one who had spoken turned again and groaned ruefully. The feeling I got when he did that made me terribly uneasy. My inner thoughts had communicated to them so quickly that they seemed almost to be participating in my mind. But they were completely separate from me, very much themselves. When events become strange enough, the mind has no contacts, no terminology in which to place them. Thought stops. One becomes inwardly silent, recording without comment. When the Spanish conquistador Pizarro stood in the great Inca city of Cuzco before the assembled crowd of its citizens, the sophisticated and civilized Incas were similarly struck dumb. I suppose that they also were victims of strangeness, too extreme for their minds to grasp. I remember what I saw and did, though. I remember it exactly. The corridor we were in was a neutral gray tan in color and curved gracefully upward and around to the left. Along the inner wall were large drawers outlined in dark brown, with a round knob in the middle of each. These drawers were each about 4 feet long and perhaps 18 inches high. Above them was a shelf a foot or so deep. At its highest point, right above my head, the arched ceiling was perhaps 7 feet from the floor. The most interesting thing about this rather austere corridor was the strong feelings seemed to be connected with it. I have not described a beautiful place, but that is only because it is hard to put into words how it affected me. There was something absolutely marvelous about the interplay of angles, the perfection of shape, and line seemed to fulfill an obscure but intense inner hunger. It was as if not only the two beings, but also their place was in some way conscious. I was confused. This place seemed conscious? Was I actually inside some kind of creature? I wondered if there could be a conscious machine. During the same month, April 1986, another man had come face to face with a gigantic pulsating light in a woods near Pound Ridge, New York, which is within 50 miles of my cabin. At one point, he commented, "It seemed alive," quote unquote. There had been much speculation that UFOs may in some way be living creatures. At that moment, I would not have doubted it. We turned and went through an arched door into a large room. The room was round and had lavoured windows. It looked something like a round version of a regimental dining room from the days of the British Raj in India. All that was missing were ceiling fans with mahogany blades and turbaned servants carrying gin and tonics on heavy silver trays. The room was instead filled with beings who were very far from black or blue. They were, as a matter of fact, absolutely white as sheets. Their skin had the milky translucency one associates with termites. They were all sitting at the round tables wearing uniforms, whose design reminded me a little bit of British whites. This was the first time I had seen the white beings. Later I would come to regard them with great awe, as the very engineers of transformation, because I had never seen them mentioned before either in folklore or in UFO literature. I worried that they might be nothing more than the production or distorted perception. On the night of March 3rd, 1988, I attended a meeting in Los Angeles of people who have had the visitor experience. To my surprise, one member of the group mentioned that the beings she had encountered were translucent white and powerfully transformative in impact, like me. She also had trouble remembering their eyes. A few of the people who corresponded with me about communion also described such beings, so I am not isolated in my perception of them. As I approached them, they radiated an overwhelming atmosphere of absolutely rigid formality, so strong that I involuntarily returned to my old military school days and snapped to attention. One of these white creatures took me by the hand. Some others, I noticed, were sitting disconsolately with squares of gauze over their eyes and chins. Only their mouths and the tips of their vestigial noses showed, and they seemed to be in pain. Were they demonstrating what would happen to them if they tried to impose an empire on us? I found myself led to the center of the room, where there was a small tan circle in the floor. I stood in this circle, where I was briefly addressed by what I took to be the leader of the group. His air was extremely formal, even more so than that of any of the others around me. He seemed full of anger and contempt. He also seemed made to rule. He proceeded to ask me in clipped tones to explain why the British Empire had collapsed. Despite my surprise, I wanted to talk. I found that I had an enormous amount of information at my fingertips. I talked. More. I lectured, my voice booming out in this almost preternaturally quiet place. I went through the various expansions and contradictions of the empire, finally contending that by 1900 it had ceased to have even the appearance of an economic alliance, and had become a system by which one race exploited many others. It was founded in assumptions of racial superiority, which, while they may have been innocent, were so profound as to guarantee the intense separation pressure would follow any general improvement in the educational level and standard of living of its subject peoples. They listened to this explanation with what seemed to me to be too much interest. They were so faultlessly attentive that I became embarrassed, but I ran on and on, spewing names and dates until I was feeling horribly awkward about the whole thing. My ego seemed enormous, and my eagerness to display my false erudition seemed to be farcical posturing of a fool. Finally, I could say no more and lapsed into silence. There was a moment of quiet, and then the room seemed to fill with excited thoughts. Isn't he wonderful? How full of facts! How learned! There was an ugly edge of irony to these thoughts, which I felt rather than heard. That was cold and hard and true. I stood there writhing inwardly. At last the two blue ones started beckoning me to the doorway. From the doorway. My audience had ceased to display excessive enthusiasm, and now communicated an atmosphere of cold indifference. To say that I slunk out would not be accurate. One cannot slink in a long garment without getting tangled up in it. If I'd been normally dressed, I think I might have crawled. That's how ashamed of myself I felt. My empire fantasies were worse than a joke. They represented dangerously weak thinking. I was forced by my clothing to move like an arrogant prince, which made me feel even more like a toad. Carrying myself as best as I was able to, I left the room. We were going down the curving corridor again, when one of the blue beings looked up at me with his wide face. I saw it clearly this time, and it was really startlingly horrible. Awful. The eyes glittered as if they were shining black membranes, with something moving behind them that made lumps and pits as it seethed within the eyeball. He smiled, showing the tips of his gray, spongy-looking teeth. His companion pulled open one of the drawers. In the drawer were stacks of bodies like their own, all encased in what looked like cellophane. Their eyes were open, their mouths wide as if with surprise. I did not know what to make of it. The oddest thing was the way the drawer was opened with a prideful flourish. I was being shown something the two of them clearly thought was wonderful. It was not until much later that I came to understand that they were beginning the long process of freeing me from fear of death. I think that they must normally exist in some other state of being, that they use bodies to enter our reality as we use scuba gear to penetrate the depths of the sea. I suspect that we also are like this, but that we have somehow lost touch with our fundamental reality and become almost glued to the physical. After seeing into the drawers, my mind went black. I have no further memories from that night. But there you have it. There's an alien abduction encounter from Whitley Strieber, and we'll end with that today. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you're tuning in on Spotify or any audio format only, like Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Spotify, Anchor, anything like that, Breaker, please give us a rating, a 5-star rating if you enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube and anything else. And y'all have a good day.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, would interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.